Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The NTIA has announced $930 million from the $1 billion Middle Mile Broadband Grant Program. We'll be back in just a minute to take a look at that. Hey there, Rick Uzzi for Broadband Deployment News. Thanks for joining me. So the Middle Mile Broadband Grant Program is a billion-dollar program meant to provide middle mile infrastructure, unlike the BEAD program, which is focused. Doesn't have to be just last mile internet on the BEAD program, but it's primarily focused on last mile internet services. Connecting up homes, all of these unserved areas that we have, whether it be a lot of group of area or homes that are in an area, or even just some individual homes here and there. It's meant to connect up the last mile to the subscriber. The Middle Mile Grant Program is meant to provide the infrastructure that's needed to connect those unserved areas to the larger internet, so to speak, to the backbone. And there's $1 billion in there, which I think everybody knew was not nearly enough, but at least it's $1 billion that can be used for that. And they've announced $930 million, so almost all of it, 93%, I guess, of the program here has been announced now. This was as of yesterday. So you see here they announced $930 million, $21,354.34 to expand middle mile high-speed internet infrastructure across 35 states and Puerto Rico. The Enabling Middle Mile Broadband Infrastructure Program invests in projects that build regional networks that connect to national internet networks. Middle mile internet infrastructure carries large amounts of data over long distances, increases capacity to local networks, boosts network resiliency, lowers the cost of bringing high-speed internet service to unconnected households, and helps connect unserved regions to the internet backbone. And this is important because as states are looking at what they're going to do with their BEAD money, they were probably maybe have been calculating in there maybe some middle mile infrastructure that was needed. So now they'll know from this what is going to be going towards middle mile infrastructure that they don't then need to worry about funding as part of their BEAD program or their projects. So that's good to know for them. So it's good, I think, that this came out prior to the June 30 date when the NTIA is going to come out and say how much each state gets, because each state will now have a better idea of, okay, what resource do we have as far as middle mile? If it's not there now, they'll be able to take good inventory of what they have now, but they'll be able to see what's coming in the future based on these awards here. Commerce Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo said, much like how the interstate highway system connected every community in America to regional and national systems of highways, this program will help us connect communities across the country to regional and national networks that provide quality, affordable, high-speed internet access. That's a good analogy, where you've got you've got the roads and whatnot that connect each home, but then you need the interstate highway, practically, to be able to get more cars be able to get across the country where they need to go. Otherwise, people would be driving all on back roads and it would be a mess, right? So we have the interstate highway to do that, to handle more capacity of cars, to get cars from one place to another. This will be very similar as far as broadband goes. The $1 billion Middle Mile Program funds construction, improvement, or acquisition of middle mile infrastructure, along with administrative costs associated with running the program. Middle mile projects do not directly connect end user locations, as I mentioned. So here's some facts here. So new middle mile grants, 350 counties across 35 states and Puerto Rico are what are going to be impacted by this. And it may be that infrastructure just goes through a state. For example, I was seeing one that was going from Dallas to Atlanta. When I say it just goes through a state, I mean it's going to pass through various areas in a state. So, it's not just for that state, but it's providing middle mile, in this case, very long mile, let's say, in the case of Dallas to Atlanta, connection between those 2 points and then in between. And as it does that, it's passing through various counties through those states. Over 12,000 miles of new fiber that will pass within 1,000 feet of 6,961 community anchor institutions. So that was part of the requirement in the Middle Mile Grant NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, was that if you were within 1,000 feet of a community anchor institution, then you needed to connect up that community anchor institution with service, or where they could connect up with that service. not necessarily connect them up, but where they could connect up to that service. So that will, again, take some of the burden away from states as they have to target those community anchor institutions. Then they'll know that they've got middle mile infrastructure nearby. They don't need to worry about that. And it can shorten the distances of what's needed to be able to connect up those anchor institutions. Future-proof, as the primary technology awardees are investing in additional future-proof fiber as the primary technology. I'm putting two things together there. Future-proof fiber. So everything in here is fiber as far as these middle mile networks. And so you could do middle mile through, let's say, point-to-point microwave shots, those kinds of things. But everything is fiber, which is good. Future-proof fiber is the primary technology. I guess there could be some wireless shots on some of these areas, but because it does say primary technology. Awardees are investing an additional $848.46 million in matching funding. So there's a 30% match. There was a 30% match required in this program. So my calculation tells me that that's an 87% match. So they're getting 87% more of funds. So, and one thing that was allowed in this program for matching funds would be in-kind kinds of contributions, which could be infrastructure and other kinds of things that were already existing that you could say could include in the match. I'm thinking that that's probably a big part of this. Now it was competitive grants, and there were lots of grants. So they had there were lots of applications. They had far more applications for these grants than they had money. So it was competitive, and it's certainly possible that companies were trying to pitch in as much as they could on the match to try to get these funds, and a lot of that could have been in-kind kinds of contributions. So rather than 87% dollar-wise, this 848.46% might not all be just hard dollars, but could be in-kind contributions. I would suspect that's the case. Grants span from $2.7 million to $88.8 million, with an average award amount of $26.6 million. And back to the match, for example, I forgot to mention something, is that you cannot use, for the match here, funds from, let's say, ARPA. So you couldn't take some of your ARPA funds and use that as a match toward the middle mile grant program. That's not allowed. That would be allowed for the BEAD program. So if subgrantees need to get a match. Let's say they're having a hard time coming with a match, but they're a good candidate to be able to provide broadband somewhere. Then the state can take some of their ARPA money if they haven't already committed to something else, and they could provide that to that entity for as part of a match for the BEAD program. So that's something that's available there. It was not available here, but still they didn't need it. They had 87% match on these. Let's see, background on enabling the Middle Mile Grant Program. Over 260 applications were submitted, totaling $7.47 billion in funding requests. So there was only $1 billion available, and they got $7.47 billion in applications. So you can see this was something, again, a competitive grant process, and not everybody won, obviously. Eligible awardees for the program include states, tribal governments, utility companies, telecommunications companies, and nonprofit entities. So unlike the BEAD program, where the eligible entities are only the states and tribal governments, in the case there, in this case, it could be any internet service provider could apply for this. Again, it mentions utility companies, telecom companies, and nonprofits could do this. And it does tend to be your larger internet providers that are maybe more regional players, or utilities that have networks across a state or a region. Because they're the perfect people to be providing a middle mile service, because they span a lot of areas. So it wouldn't be like your local ISP that would be getting involved in this so much as some that cover more geography. It says additional grants will be announced on a rolling basis. There's not much left. So there's about 7 million left. So that will be. It says those will be rolled out. I'm assuming they're talking about that here. They also mention other stuff in here, but. So again, I think they were probably shooting to get most of this announced prior to them announcing the BEAD allocation, so that everybody has an idea of what is going to be not required as far as middle mile. And then I linked to this news release in the description of this video. I also linked to this. This is the funding recipients and information on them. I won't look at all of these, but I was just going to show you that this is here, and it shows you all of the folks that are getting the funds from this. I'll click on a couple of them. So like the first one here, and these are these are sorted alphabetically. It doesn't tell you what the state is on the right here, but Troy is in Alabama. So, it's alphabetical this way, and you can click in and see what it is. And you can see here, this is Connect Alabama. You see up here, here's the state right here and all of these. So you see the primary state, Alabama, Connect Alabama, and they got 52 million. And then there's a description. There's the counties that are, this is going to cover, and there's a description of what they're going to be doing. For example, 677.1 route miles, 411.5 route miles for access to unserved areas, 29.8 route miles for access to underserved areas, and 235.8 route miles for connectivity to 4 internet peering points. Probably mentions on some of these, as far as what they're connecting on community anchor institutions. I didn't look through all of these. And then you can just click here to close it. This next one, this was the big one. So this is Alaska. So this is the one that's 150. That's the project cost. So again, with the match in there, and then you've got $88.896 million. So this was the largest one, and this is Alaska. And you can imagine Alaska would have the largest, and certainly has the greatest need for middle mile, being that it's a huge state with not very much population relative to the size of the state. So you've got lots of area, not as many people in it. More widespread areas that need to be connected. So they're going to need way more middle mile infrastructure than a state like Rhode Island, for example. So Rhode Island may not have even put in for this. I didn't see them in here. Whereas Alaska has this need, and this is not probably nearly enough, but Alaska can actually take, I think states can take some of their BEAD funding that they get, and they can actually put it towards middle mile infrastructure if it's going to be helping to connect all of these unserved areas. So BEAD does not necessarily have to be used for the last mile, because it's not going to do you any good to connect up a lot of last mile locations if you don't have middle mile infrastructure to be able to then get them where they need to go to get on the internet. So I think a state like Alaska, they've got this money, which is a good amount of money for them, but if they need more, they can take some of their BEAD funding and use it for that. And they've got fewer people in the state maybe than lots of other states, because it's a large state, but it's pretty remote in lots of areas. So that's Alaska. And then there's one other one I was going to look at, because it's just interesting and challenging and for them, and that was, where is it here? Hawaii Telecom. Project Urgent. So it's an urgent project, I'm sure, but that's the name of the project. So they're getting 87, or the project cost, 87.466 million, and they're getting 37 million of that from this funding in Hawaii. So, they're another challenging state, because it's an island, right? It's the only island state we have. We've got Puerto Rico and some territories, but as far as the state of Alaska, you can see what some of the things that they're covering. It consists of 15 new terrestrial and undersea routes. So they've got undersea, they got to get middle mile infrastructure between the islands that make sure that they can handle all of the areas that are going to be connecting up. Undersea routes and over 600 kilometers of fiber. The digital divide is particularly prevalent in Hawaii communities that are unserved or underserved, especially on islands like Maui, Molokai, Kauai, and Hawaii Island, Big Island, I guess, and Oahu, rural Oahu communities. Let's name some other things in here. These areas are particularly vulnerable. Hawaii is ranked among the worst states in national terrestrial broadband coverage and amongst the slowest average download speeds. So this will all help. And again, as they get this middle mile infrastructure set up, this will help Hawaii as far as what they can do or how far their BEAD money will go, because they'll get a lot of this taken care of as far as getting the islands connected that need to be connected. And again, I don't know if this is enough for Hawaii as far as middle mile, and they could then use some of their BEAD funding if they need to for that as well. So anyway, this is whoops, excuse me, didn't mean to do that. So this is good news for the states that now are going to be finding out how much BEAD funding they're going to be getting, so they can see here, because some of these are not going directly to the states. These are going, in most cases, these are going to be going to, again, telecom operators and whatnot. So while the states may have known about this, because they've been reaching out to all of the service providers, I'm sure, in their states as they go through their planning phase right now for BEAD programming. But in some cases, the operator, their primary location could be in a totally different state, and the middle mile infrastructure runs through their state. And they may be aware of that, may have been aware of that, but now it's kind of set in stone as to who's getting what and how much and where it's going to be covering. So that's good news for them. Thanks for joining me today for Broadband Deployment News. If this has been interesting or helpful, if you give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button and click the bell to be notified when I'm live. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.